بسم الله وبركة الله. معكم يزيد الحربي، طالب طب وجراحة بالسنة الخامسة في جامعة الملك سعود. اليوم بتكلم عن ال Organization of the Nervous System. بنبدأها بسيناريو بسيط وخفيف. نفترض أنك جالس في الصالة تتفرج لك مسلسل على نتفليكس، اللي هو أنك تشم ريحة شيء يحترق، ريحة حريق. ففي ناس من بيطلع من المكان، من البيت كامل، وفيه من بيروح بيدور عن مكان الحريق، وفيه من بيتجاهل الشيء هذا وبيجلس. طبعا كلهم have different responses but كلهم under one nervous system أو under one system اللي هو nervous system، وهو اللي خلاهم كل واحد منهم يظهر على different response. The nervous system, it's what makes us who we are. So how can we define the nervous system? It's a network of cells that coordinate of actions and transmit signals between different parts of the body, which allows us to react to the changing environment around us. The nervous system has three principal functions overlapping each other. One is the sensory input. The nervous system uses its millions of sensory receptors to monitor the changes, which are occurring both inside and outside of the body. Those changes called stimuli. Integration processes and interprets the sensory input and making decisions about what should be done at each moment. Motor output، أو أنا حتى نضعت من قوسين الريسبونس، لأنه ممكن يكون مثل المثال السابق أو السيناريو السابق أنا واحد يتجاهل الشيء هذا. So the nervous system sends information to muscles, glands, and organs so they can respond correctly. The nervous system is made by two types of cells: neurons, or the nerve cells, and neuroglia, or the glial cells, or neuroglia cells. Neuron is the basic structural, embryological, and functional unit of the nervous system. So what's its functions? Simply, before we go to the functions, it's conduct the impulses that can be receive signals or information, integrate the incoming signals, and communicate signals to the target cells, so on other neurons or muscles or glands. So neuron constitute of cell body, or ما يعرف بالسوما, which has nucleus and mitochondria and other organelles. And it has dendrites, which is a process carry the impulse toward the cell body. And axon, which is connected to the cell body by the axon hillock, and it's carry the impulse away from the cell body. Myelin sheath, which help to insulate and increase the speed of impulses. Node of Ranvier, it's help as propagation or jumping propagation for the impulses. And finally, axon terminal, which is connected to the other neuron at the synapse to transmit the signal. This image can show you simply what is synapse. You can see here the axon terminal of one neuron, and this is the dendrite of other neuron, and they transmit the signal. So we can classify the neuron in multiple classification, so by structural or by function or like direction or neurotransmitter. But we'll focus here on the structural classification, which is based upon the number of processes from the dendrite and other. So first we have unipolar neuron, bipolar, multipolar, and finally we have the pseudo-unipolar. Unipolar have a single short process that emerges from the cell body and divides into the proximal and distal branches and is present in the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. Bipolar have two processes, an axon and dendrite, that extend from opposite ends of the cell bodies and is present in the olfactory epithelium and on the retina. Multipolar, which is the most common type, and this accounts for more than 99% of all neurons, have one axon and two or more dendrites. The pseudo-unipolar has one process which serves as both axon and dendrite, and we can find it in the dorsal root ganglion. Neuroglia. Neuroglia is a supporting cells. They are not excitable cells like neurons, but they support the nervous system. We have 6 types of neuroglia. One is 4 types in the central nervous system and 2 in the peripheral nervous system. So we'll start by ependymal cells. The ependymal cells is this type of simple columnar glial cells with a cilia that help to circulate. طبعا هو lining the ventricles, so it's helped to circulate the cerebrospinal fluid. Oligodendrocytes, which is help to produce the myelin sheath in the axon of the central nervous system. Astrocytes, astro from star-like cells, it's the largest and the most numerous cells of the neuroglial cells of the nervous system, the central nervous system, and the nervous system at all. And it's fill up the extracellular process between neurons. And it's help as extracellular potassium buffer. And microglia, it's the smallest, and it's help to in the immune defense for the nervous system and the central nervous system, and it's become macrophages and become phagocytic as needed. And in the peripheral nervous system, we have satellite cells. We have satellite cells, and it's known as amphicytes, and we have Schwann cells, which is help to produce the myelin sheath in the axon outside the central nervous system. The nervous tissue in the central nervous system can be gray matter or white matter. The gray matter is constituted or composed of cell bodies and unmyelinated axons and neuroglial cells. And white matter composed of myelinated and unmyelinated axons. So when you see a coronal plane of the brain, when you see the cerebral cortex, which is from the gray matter, and the medulla, which is from white matter, and the basal nuclei, which is from the gray matter. So the medulla, the white matter is surrounded by the gray matter. But when you see a cross section of the spinal cord, you'll find the gray matter is surrounded by white matter. أما a nervous tissue in the peripheral nervous system can be divided to the ganglion or nerve. Ganglion, the cell bodies, the group of the cell bodies outside the central nervous system, and the nerve, it's a group of nerves, of axons outside the nervous system, or central nervous system. So here's the example of one of the ganglions, the dorsal root ganglion, and you can find here in the nerve, structure of the nerve. So every axon, it's covered by a layer of connective tissue called the endoneurium. And the group of axons is covered, it's form a fascicle, which is covered by the perineurium. And the group of fascicles is forming a nerve, and it's covered by the epineurium. So we'll take a breath. So the central nervous system can be divided to two major subdivisions. One is the central nervous system, and the second is the peripheral nervous system. A central nervous system is like the control center, which all the sensory information integrate there, and in order to generate motor output. And the peripheral nervous system is the method of communication between the central nervous system and the environment. We can divide the central nervous system structurally to two, brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system to cranial nerves and spinal nerves. So we'll take a little bit about the anatomy of the brain. We have the cerebrum. We have the diencephalon, which is constituted of a thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and the ventral hypothalamus. We have the brain stem, which contains the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. We have the cerebellum, which coordinates the motor movement, and we have the ridges, the elevation in the cerebrum, what we called is gyri, and the grooves between gyri, we call it sulci. A cerebrum can constitute of two parts, cerebral hemisphere or right hemisphere, cerebral hemisphere or left cerebral hemisphere, which is divided by the longitudinal fissure. As each cerebral hemisphere can be divided into 5 loops. The frontal loop, which involved in the cognitive function, the parietal loop, in processing the taste, touch, and other senses, the occipital loop mainly and vision, and temporal loop for the encoding the memory. And we have a hidden loop under the lateral sulcus called the insula. The brain have a hollow structures called the ventricles. It's contained the cerebrospinal fluid, and it's lining by the neuroglia cells, which is the ependymal cells. So we have 2 lateral ventricles in each cerebral hemisphere. We have, then it's connected to a third ventricle is connected by the inner ventricular foramina. Then we'll have a fourth ventricle, which is connected by the cerebral aqueduct. Then it's into the central canal of the spinal cord. So the protection of the central of the brain is, first of all, is the skull, the meninges, and the cerebrospinal fluid. So the meninges, which is 3 layers of connective tissue, a dura mater, which is the outermost layer and the fibrous and the toughest one, arachnoid matter, which is web-like and contains the cerebrospinal fluid, the pia mater, which is the innermost layer that contains the blood capillaries. In the spine, on spinal cord, we have the same protection, but with a different. The first one, the brain, we have the cranium, but here we have the vertebral column. So you can see here the spinal cord. It starts to extend from the foramen magnum and end at the level 2, the second lumbar vertebrae. We have two enlargements. We have cervical enlargement and we have lumbosacral enlargement. And it's arising from the spinal cord, what we call the spinal nerves. We have 31 pairs of the spinal nerves, 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. And you can see here, spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column. The spinal nerve formed by the fusing of the ventral root and dorsal root. The cranial nerves. We have 12 pairs of the cranial nerves. You will have separate lectures that will talk about it in more details, but I will go through it quickly. So we have 12 pairs, which is from the brain. First of all, the olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlea, trigeminal, abducens nerve, the facial nerve, the vestibulocochlear nerve, the glossopharyngeal, the vagus, the accessory, and finally hypoglossal nerve. Now we'll talk about briefly about the peripheral nervous system. So we can divide the peripheral nervous system to physiologically to sensory division or afferent division and motor division or efferent division. Sensory division, which is hold and take the signals from the body to the central nervous system. And the motor division, which hold the signals and transmit the signals from the central nervous system to the whole body. We have two types of motor division. We have the autonomic nervous system and we have somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system work in the skeletal muscles, in what we can control consciously. And the autonomic nervous system work in the smooth, cardiac, and glandular epithelium, what we can't control. We have two types of autonomic nervous system. We can divide the autonomic nervous system to the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic. A sympathetic nervous system, or known to be the fight or flight, it's work in the stress situation, in emergencies. And the parasympathetic response, what we also known as to be rest and digest, or another name is housekeeping. It's work in the calm and peace situations. طبعا the parasympathetic system operate in conjunction, but with opposing effect, and I'll explain how. So in the sympathetic nervous system, the patient will have dilate of the pupils, but in situations of rest and digest, the parasympathetic will work as will constrict the pupil. The sympathetic nervous system will inhibit the flow of saliva, and the parasympathetic will stimulate the flow of the saliva. The same thing in the heartbeat. We'll have accelerate in the sympathetic nervous system, and we'll have slows of the heartbeat in the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's all. Thank you very much. Any questions?